Shalom, shalom, and blessings. Welcome to the Fourth Angels Learning Center. My name is Jadiel. I want to thank you guys for tuning in and studying with us today. Today is going to be quite of an in-depth discussion on the calendar. We're going to be discussing and handling some of these difficult questions pertaining to the calendar. There's been a lot of questions coming in concerning the reckoning of how we do it at Fourth Angels Learning Center, as well as other places such as Assembly of Yahuah, and how the reckoning of the time of the year and the months are actually done in order to get to the appointed times, the feast days. So what we want to do is we want to kind of answer these questions, kind of solidify an understanding, because I believe that these questions are very pivotal to what we would accept. I do want to point out that the thing that's happening is that when there's a question that can't be answered, there's an assumption that there's no answer. And so what they do is they apply the best idea that comes to their own mind. And this is not the best way to come to a conclusion when it comes to scripture. When it comes to conclusions, when it comes to concluding what's in the scripture, we need to lay it on the table, to share it with our brethren, especially the ones that we trust, the ones that we see that has the spirit, the ruach, and then test it to see if the scriptures add up. There's been a lot of instances in which many people would go off and they would answer their own questions, or they would go off and come up with their own conclusions and not lay it in front of the brethren that they are with. So what I want to do is I want to tackle some of those difficult questions and allow the scriptures and history to kind of answer these things. So before we get started, if this is your first time tuning in, or if it's not your first time tuning in and you want to support this ministry, you can support us at 4ALC. There's instructions on the PayPal donation in the description below. You can also support us on Cash App on a $4ALC bless. That's 4ALC BLESS. And again, if this is the first time, or if this is not the first time you're watching it, but if you haven't subscribed yet, we suggest, or we encourage, that you subscribe to the ministry, click the notification bell, so that way you can be updated on our new videos, our new studies, and our new classes. The best thing that we can get as support is prayer, as well as sharing this material. What we're trying to do is educate the masses on what's in scripture and scripture alone. And we can definitely use help in sharing and spreading this truth if it is a blessing to you. All right, so we're going to get into it. Now, the first question that we're going to come up with, that we're going to address, is why do we use the Gregorian calendar to determine the Shabbat? Do we use the Gregorian calendar to determine the seventh-day Shabbat? And I want to address that historically. Many people keep referring to the 7 days of the week as the Gregorian calendar. This is extremely incorrect. The weekly cycle is not directly connected to the Gregorian calendar or the Julian Roman calendar that existed prior to this calendar we have today. Because the weekly cycle was applied when they came up with these monthly dates, this monthly cycle and this yearly cycle that many of these empires came up with, apply the seventh day week to their calendar. And we can see that historically. The Gregorian calendar didn't come into play until around 1752, when they made that initial change from the Julian calendar. They replaced it. There was a whole bunch of aspects of the intercalary days which they would call leap years and things like that. Their calendar basically wasn't measuring up with the seasons and with the times of the year. So they decided to change the calendar from the Julian into the Gregorian. And then they initially did this change in around like 1572. And the interesting thing is that when they made that change, there was like 11 days was dropped off of the monthly set dates on their calendar. So when the 11 days was dropped off of that monthly set date, in I believe the dates that we have on record is October 4th, 1582. The next day was October 15th. Now, the interesting thing that it was Thursday, October 4th, 1852, and the next day was Friday, October 15th, showing that though the monthly timing has absolutely changed, the weekly cycle was not touched when the Gregorian calendar was incorporated into the system that we have now. Like same way before, when Romulus started the Empire of Rome, they did not keep a 7-day calendar. It was adopted. The 7-day cycle was adopted to these pagan calendars. Okay, Babylon, there's records that the Babylonian cycle was based off of the moon. So their weekly cycle was attached to their dates. If you look up the Babylonian calendar, you'll see that their weeks ended on exactly either the 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th, or et cetera, et cetera. I believe, let me show that, because I don't want to just make claims and have no. All right. So check this out. Let me share my screen. All right. So you see here the Babylonian calendar. Babylonian calendar. This was a lunisolar calendar. And let me go straight to, this is the name of the Babylonian calendar, Nisanu. So when the Israelites was in the Babylonian captivity, they adopted some of these names for the months that the Israelites actually observed. They didn't adopt the calendar from the Babylonians. They adopted the terminologies. Likewise, the days of the week. The world did not adopt the days of the week from the Romans. They adopted the terminology of those days: Monday, Tuesday, Sunday. All of those things was based off of these particular things. So look at what it says here. It says, counting from the new moon, the Babylonians celebrated every 7th day as a set-apart day, or they would call it an evil day, meaning unsuitable for prohibited activities. On these days, officials were prohibited from various activities, and common men were forbidden to make a wish, and at least 28th was known as a rest day. So this is a Babylonian. On each of them, offerings were made to different deities, goddesses, and gods, apparently at nightfall to avoid prohibitions. It says Marduk right here. We see is the ancient Mesopotamian deity. We have Ishtar. I think everybody's familiar with Ishtar, Mesopotamian goddess. Now, this is not Nebuchadnezzar time. This is not Babylonian captivity time. This is talking about Babylon at the time of Genesis chapter 10 and 11, Nimrod's time. And look at what it says. All these goddesses on the 14th, on the 7th, they worship Ishtar. On the 14th, they worship Nanil. On the 21st, they worship Shamesh, which is, I believe, is the sun. And they worshipped Ma and Enki on the 28th of that month. These were the lunar cycles with the 7th-day cycle attached to the month. It was not the dates was attached to these months. Now, why were these Babylonians observing rest days on the 7th day? Well, If you look at Genesis chapter 10, it's not far from the rest that was established at creation. So the rest that was established at creation wasn't deviated from. They understood and recognized that there was a literal seventh-day week. So when Cain decided to separate and do what he did and murder his brother, and then they had, he created a whole nation that rebelled against Yah. They did not just erase all the truth or all the facts about what Yah did in history. What they did was distort it. They distorted it. Likewise, the same thing happened when they came about after the flood. When they came after the flood and the people of the earth rebelled, they did not deviate from certain things. What they did was they distorted certain true aspects, such as the idea of a father and a son. So it's very, and the idea of a mother was actually an idea that came later on. It wasn't the same idea. It wasn't a Babylonian idea. It was all at the same time. It was the idea that came that Nimrod was the sun, Tammuz was the sun god, and then the woman aspect came later on when Semiramis, according to the legend, applied that she was from the moon. So this wasn't like a planned idea that they were going to perpetuate. This was a gradual increasing of this information and elaborating of this information. So we clearly see that Babylon had a lunar solar calendar, and they worshiped certain deities on the 7th, the 14th, 21st, and the 28th. And the 28th. Now, many people think that they say that the lunar Sabbath was connected to those calendars, but they're just theories. They're not even like based off of any conclusive evidence. Like the Babylonian calendar, they found on tablets and things like that. So you guys could go do research on that aspect alone. So I'm going to make sure I cover the timing of the Gregorian. I'm expressing that the Gregorian calendar did not touch the weekly cycle, because what it did was it affected the monthly cycle and the yearly cycle. That's the effect that the calendar had. It did not touch the weekly cycle. Matter of fact, I just revealed October 4th, Thursday, October 4th, 1582, turned into Friday, October 15th. So October 4th turned to October 15th, but it was still Thursday and Friday. It did not affect the weekly cycle, even though it affected the monthly way of counting according to the Roman Gregorian calendar. So how is Yah's calendar actually basically timed? I want to kind of go to that. How does the scripture tell us to observe timing in Yah's calendar? So let's look at the scripture. We can see this at creation. I know everybody goes to creation, but I want to point this out. And I'm not talking about the weekly cycle. I think that this is, I don't want to apply something like, breaking down the weekly cycle from Genesis, because I know everybody's waiting for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just look at the facts according to scripture, and we're going to see how we can do line upon line, precept upon precept, and look at history. So the calendar of the months were dates, right? Let's look at this. Genesis chapter 1. Everything is observable. Genesis chapter 1, looking at verse 14. Everything is observable. It says, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day and the night. Let them be for signs, for appointed times, moedim, for days and for years. It says, let the lights be for signs, appointed times, days, and years. The lights are going to be our indicators. What does the word sign mean? Sign means, let's look at this. The word sign is H226, H226, which means a beacon, a signal, a flag, a monument, evidence. It's something that's being revealed to us. So if it's being revealed to us, that means it's an indicator. It's something that we have to observe, watch, pay attention to, listen to. I'm going to show some proof of that in the book of Psalms in a second. Verse 15, it says, let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. The stars is multiple lights. It's not, you don't look at the stars and say it's one light. Some is even brighter than others. But there's two lights that rule. One rules the day, one rules the night. What does it mean? Rule. That means that they have dominion. They dictate. They tell you things. They tell you when it's sunrise. They tell you when it's sunset. They tell you when it's noontime. They tell you when it's the hour of prayer. They tell you when the sun tells you all of these things. What does the moon tell you? It tells you what point in time in the month you are in. The phases of the moon indicate what phase of the moon you are in. At night, it reveals at what state, what timing of the month you are in. We're going to look at that. Elohim set them in the expanse to heaven to give light upon the earth. Now we saw that the light is emphasized here. That means that the light is an indicator of the signs. The lights are an indicator of the appointed times. The lights are an indicator of the days and the years. If there's no light, it's an indicator that something has ended. If the light begins, it's an indicator that something started, the day started. When the sun is directly above us and it waxes hot, it's the hottest point of the day. It's an indicator that we're moving throughout the day, that it is the hottest point of the day. They recognized that they were indicators in the sky, that they were signs, and the light was being created in order to give us a dictation of what those lights meant. Whether it meant to get up, whether it meant to go to bed, whether it meant that it was this part of the month, whether we were halfway, whether we were in the first day, whether we were in the new moon, the new month. These were all indicators. It gave us the indicators that we had to observe and be aware of. So now the two great lights. Many people say that there's I wanted to point out that it made a specific indication saying that they are for signs and they are for appointed feasts. So I want to go to a few verses. Let's go to Psalms 104. I need you guys, whatever is not clear, you let me know. You send me an email so that way I can focus on those questions. I've heard so many questions. I just try to, whatever I could remember, to put it down in one notepad. So Psalms 104, looking at verse 19, looking at the two lights, right? It says that he, Yah, appointed the moon for appointed feasts. The sun knows his going down. So he made the moon for appointed feasts. There's no going around that. He made the moon for the appointed feasts. What did we read in Genesis 1:14? In Genesis 1:14, he made it very clear. Let them be for signs and for appointed feasts. Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. So what did he say? He specifically said the moon. Psalms 104:19, he made the moon for the appointed feasts. Let's look at a few more verses. Psalms 136. Psalms 136, looking at verse 7 to 9, because there's this issue that the moon is not used. Well, let's look at this. Let him that made the great lights have mercy. His mercy endures forever. The sun to rule the day, for his mercy endures forever. And the moon and the stars to rule the night, for his mercy endures forever. So the idea that we don't use the moon and the stars to rule the night is not scriptural. There's people who are saying that you do not use the moon to indicate anything. You don't use it for anything. Well, David says different. The king of Jerusalem says something different. King of Israel. He's in Jerusalem utilizing these things and observing these things. Not only is he observing it, he's recognizing that Yah is using these things and his mercy endures forever, his timing. Let's look at a few more verses. Let's go to Jeremiah, prophet Jeremiah, verse 31. And he talks about in verse 35 about how they're used. He says, then says Yahuwah, which gives the sun for light by day, and the ordinance of the moon and the stars for light by night, which divides the sea when the waves thereof roar. Yahuwah of hosts is his name. So we see clearly the moon and the stars are for lights by night. They are for lights by night. They are supposed to be indicators at night. So I want to make sure that this is clear, that we're not leaving the moon out from being an indicator of what's going on in our appointed feasts, when our appointed feasts are due, when they're supposed to be kept, etc. Okay? Can't just use the sun. Can't just use timing, like numbering your days. You're just going to number your days 364 days or 360 days with one added every 3 months. That's not scriptural. Moses is not confirming that idea. Okay, so what it's saying is that the moon is an indicator. It's a light. It's for signs and it's for appointed times. It tells you when the appointed times. Now the appointed times are not done. It's not based off of the days of the week. It's based off of what point in time of the month. We're going to look at that in a second in Leviticus. So let's look at one more verse because I do want to make a certain point. Isaiah chapter 60. Isaiah chapter 60, verse 19 and 20. Look at what it says. It says, the sun shall no more give your light by day, neither shall for brightness shall the moon give the light unto you. But yahuah shall be unto you an everlasting light, and your Elohim your glory. Your sun shall no more go down, neither shall your moon withdraw itself. For yahuah shall be your everlasting light, and the days of your mourning shall be ended. So it's talking about the sun going down like sunset. Here it's talking about sunrise by day. Neither shall your sun go down. The moon giving light at night. And then it says the moon shall, neither shall your moon withdraw itself. It's talking about the waning and waxing of the light. The waxing of the moon, it grows till it's a full moon, and then it withdraws itself until it's a dark moon. This is what this is indicating. Now, here's the interesting part. There's this idea, it's not new moon, it's new month. You're supposed to say month. Well, let's look at what it says. Let's look at the Hebrew here. So this word moon here in Isaiah 60, verse 19, where it says, for the brightness shall the moon give light, right? This is H3394. This word is yarek, and it means the moon. You can look it up. 26 times in the scripture is mentioned only as moon, right? Now check this out. 3391 in verse 20, Isaiah 60, verse 20, neither shall your moon withdraw itself. So let's talk about that. We're talking about the light withdrawing and the sunlight withdrawing. Now look at what this means. It means lunation. It's talking about the cycle of the month. And that word is yarak. So it's talking about month. But it's used in this scripture as moon because those two words for month is yarak, is interchangeable. So look, 6 is used as month as well as moon. In Deuteronomy 33, verse 14, it says, for the precious fruits brought forth by the sun and for the precious things put forth by the moon, not by the month, by the moon. So we have to understand the word for moon and the word for month are coinciding together. They're used interchangeably. The word for moon is not used in any way. It's inside the word, though. It's inside the word. The word for moon is yareyak. Now, yareyak, I want to show you the root word of yareyak. It says it's from the word yarak. So the word moon comes from the word that's used for month. So this is why they use the phrase new moon in the scripture to indicate a new month, because those words are interchangeable. Okay? Yareyak is used for moon, and the root word is month. So to disconnect the moon from the month, it's like disconnecting Hebrew from Hebrew. It doesn't make any sense. So due to the seasons that Yah created, especially after the flood, many people are trying to take Enoch's calendar, which I believe, if it even existed, it's something that was conjured up before the flood. I think even in Genesis, it would indicate that, because he was taken up before the flood. I think there was no rain, there was no seasons, there was none of that stuff when Enoch was taken up. After the flood, which is way before Enoch was taken, is when the season started, is when rain actually started, when they had harvest time. And we can see that in the scripture. Let's look at a few things here. So we're going to look at something very specific, and I want to point this out. Now, remember, I don't want to go straight to the normal arguments about evening and the morning. I don't want to even touch that. I want to first address all these other ideas that I believe would kind of be counterproductive for their own argument. So look at Genesis chapter 2, looking at verse 5 and 6. It says, every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, yahuah, let me go to that, yahuah Elohim had not caused it to rain upon the earth. There was not rain until there was not a man to till the ground, but there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the earth. Yahuwah Elohim formed man out of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living soul. Yahuwah Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. So man is in the garden, no rain, it's not coming from the sky. So this is already different. This is already different. There was also no weather seasons, like there was no winter, there's no fall, things like that, until after the flood. Let's go to that verse. Genesis chapter, I think is at Genesis chapter. Yeah. So Genesis chapter 8, Noah comes off the ark. It says Noah built the ark unto Yahuwah to make offerings. Genesis chapter 8, verse 20. And he took every clean beast and every clean fowl and offered an ascending smoke offering unto the altar. Yahuwah smelt the sweet fragrance, and Yahuwah said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground anymore for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite anymore every living thing as I have done. Look at what it says in verse 22. While the earth remains. So now, while the earth is here, there will be seed time and harvest. There will be cold and heat. Summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Let's look at this. Calm down, guys, with the day and night. I know you guys see that. We're going to address that in a second. Look at this. What does it mean? Seed time, time to plant, harvest time, time to crop, reap, cold time, heat time. What does summer mean? Harvest time. Summer is the harvest, is when everything is fully ripe. This is around June, around Shavuot, Feast of Harvest, right? It says, and winter. Winter means crop gathering. This is in the fall, in the autumn, in gathering, Feast of Tabernacles. So this is what's occurring now after the flood. Before the flood, these things did not exist. So nobody was trying to keep up with the seasons. You got it? But we know that they were keeping count of observation. Why? Because Noah was in the ark and he was counting the days of the month. He knew what month he was in. So a lot of things changed after the flood, considering the environment, considering the earth itself. So this is very important for us to understand. So now we have hot and cold. So now we have the sun and the moon gives us a different indicator. They give us a different sign. And we see this in Psalms chapter 19. Let's look at Psalms chapter 19. And it shows us that there's a different kind of indicator that occurs after the feast. It says, the heavens declare the glory of Elohim, and the expanse shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech. Night shows knowledge. That means that the day tells us something and the night tells us something. I hope that you guys are understanding. The day reveals speech to us or tells us something, and the night shows us knowledge. It tells us something. It says, there is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard, of course, because they're lights. They're lights, and the sun also gives off something else. Look at what it says here. Verse 4, their line or circuit is gone out through all the earth. That means their rotation. And their words to the end of the world, meaning like their effect on the world is seen all over the world. Their effect on the earth is seen and understood all over the, sunset, sunrise, but also this, it says, in them, he has set a tabernacle for the sun. So in the sky or in the heavens, he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber and rejoices as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of the heavens and his circuit to the ends of it. And there is nothing that is hid from the heat thereof, meaning that even the heat is according to the speech right here. There's no speech nor language where their voices are not heard. So the heat of the sun also gives us an indicator or a sign of what's going on. When it's cold, remember what we read in Genesis chapter 8, verse 22, there's a time of cold. That means that the sun is going to retract its heat. There's a time of heat. There's a summer, there's a warm, there's a hot, there's a cold now. So the sun gives us indicators as to what part of the year we're in based off of the temperature, not only just the light of every day, but also the temperature throughout the year are indicators of what part of the year we're also in. So again, the sun and the moon, which gives us light and knowledge according to this verse 2, it says night unto night shows knowledge. That means that every night is going to reveal a certain understanding from the sky. We are to understand what part of the month we are in because the moon is an indicator of the date of the month. Why do I say the moon is an indicator of the dates of the month? Well, because Leviticus 23 tells us that the feasts, which the moon is an indicator of the feasts. The feast lands on particular days of the month. Does not mention anything about the week. The first thing that it mentions in Leviticus 23 is how to calculate Shabbats. It says, speak unto the children of yasharal, Yisrael, and say unto them concerning the feast of yahuah, which you shall proclaim to be in their to be holy assemblies. These are my feasts. 6 days you shall work, but the seventh day is the Shabbat of rest, a set apart assembly. You shall do no work therein. It is the Shabbat of yahuah in all your dwellings. Now watch this. He repeats it again now, talking about a different type of timing. This one is the Shabbat, the seventh day. Count 6 days, get to the seventh day. Now he says, these are the feasts of yahuah, even the set apart assemblies, which you shall proclaim in their appointed times. Matches what it says in Genesis chapter 1:14, as well as Psalms 104:19, that the moon is for appointed times. Now look at what it says. In the 14th day of the first month is Yahuwah's Pesach, on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of matzah, the unleavened bread, unto Yahuwah, 7 days, right? Let me continue to show you this. So now we get to Shavuot, which is based off of a count. Because if we're going to look at this as a count, it's very specific. Yahuwah tells us, very specific. You shall count, verse 15, you shall count from the morrow after the Shabbat. From the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, you shall count 7 Shabbats shall be complete. The day after the Shabbat is the first day of the week, and you will count 7 weeks from there. But look at what it says here. Now that we get to the 7th month, it says, this is the first day of the month. Feast of Trumpets. Day of Atonement, the 10th day of the 7th month. And Feast of Booths or Feast of Tabernacles, the 15th day of the 7th month. So it's very clear that there's a difference between the days of the week and the feast that lands on the dates of the month. So the argument is that the Sabbaths land on specific dates of the month, and the scripture is quiet about that. It does not indicate at all at any point in time that there's a month date for the 7th day Shabbat. But there's individuals who believe that it's on the 7th, 14th, 21st, 28th, or that it's on the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th. Either way, you're putting the Shabbat on a date, and there is no date for that. Not only that, but we just saw how they counted for Shavuot, Feast of Harvest, Feast of Weeks. Feast of Weeks supposed to be counted after a Shabbat on the day that they wave the wave sheaf. This is not based off of a date. This is based off of a count. So in the same chapter, you see those indicators by counting, and then we have the dates of the appointed times in the month. So what we're doing is, I'm not sure what we're doing. We're projecting what makes sense to us, and it seems like it's too much. So there's this idea. There's 12 months, right? 12 months in the year. Each month is 30 days. Prophetically, I want to bring this up because the way that we count it today, it doesn't match up with 30-day month. It's between 29 and 30 days based off of the counting of the moon. So some months is 29, some months is 30 days based off of the counting of the moon. Some months has the dark moon, and some months do not have the dark moon. So that even discounts people who think that there's always a dark moon. There's not always a dark moon. There's indicators, so there's 29 and then there's 30-day counts, right? By observing. There's no natural 30 days. So the issue is, if there's a falling behind because of that lack of timing by the moon, that there has to be an added month in order to line everything up to the circuit of the sun, or the heat or the seasons of the sun. So it seems to be a big issue because people are looking for like 1, 2, 3 scriptures on it, but people in the scripture were not arguing about it. It's kind of like looking at the Sabbath in the New Testament. Nobody had an issue or a problem or arguing about the Shabbat. So nobody is going to give a lesson in the New Testament about Shabbat. Just like, Messiah. Nobody's having an issue with understanding who Yahuwah is. It was understanding who Messiah is that was the difficulty for many. So I want to point that out because there's an intercalary, which means, I hope I'm saying it right. It means that there's an adding of this in order to line everything up. There's an adding of time in order to line everything up with the seasons, right? So there's this issue that people take. Now, what I find interesting is that the lunar Sabbath also does this as well. So because there's 12 months and there's 30 days of the months, then the amount of days of the year will be 360. So they have these intercalary days to line up everything properly. So they will add one day to every third month. So every third month there'll be, or every quarter there'll be a day added to that month. So it'll be 30, 30, 31, 30, 30, 31, 30, 30, 31. Where do they get those intercalary? Nowhere. I mean, it's just added because it's needed in order to line up. So there's an issue with adding a month, and it lines up perfectly because I've been doing this for a while. But then there's this thing where we need to have a calculating numbered calendar. We don't observe the moon. We have to have a calculating number. So we need to add this one in order for it to calculate all the way to 364, which still comes up short many times. So the concept of intercalary days is the same concept. It's to match it up with the seasons. It's just that those single days in the calendar, in the lunar calendar, or what people refer to as the Enoch calendar, or whatever calendar it is that's a lunar calendar, there's these adding of a day in order to line up the calendar or the days of the year with the seasons. If you are observing, and every new moon is a constant cycle, it doesn't end. This is what it says in Scripture. If his covenant will cease when the sun and the moon stops doing its rotations. You see what I'm saying? The sun and the moon continuously does its rotations with or without you. So if we go around through the seasons and it did a cycle on the 12th month and we need one more cycle to get it to the place that we need to be, then that's what we're going to do. Just because they calculated everything by 12s doesn't mean that means Yah told them there was 12 months of the year. When he told them in Genesis to observe it for signs. When David says that the moon is for appointed times, that the sun is an indicator. Psalms chapter 19, that the speech of the heavens is speaking to us, and that at night the moon gives us knowledge. You see, so these things are giving us indicators, helping us to read Yah's natural calendar for this earth, because after this earth, there's not going to be a necessity for these things. While we're here, we need to observe these things because that's what he created them to do. He created them to give us information and for us to observe this information, not to start here and then count all the rest of the days. That's not what he said to do. And when he did say to do that, such as with Feast of Harvest, he gave you that instruction in Scripture. So we need to make sure we understand there's nowhere in Scripture that we're getting this information. There's nowhere in Scripture that we're getting this information from. You know, so I apologize for this camera. All right, so I hope that intercalary month made sense, because in the Enoch calendar there's intercalary days, but the ones that's monthly is based off of observation. No, it does not happen every year. You know, so whenever it does occur, there is a necessity to line up the year with the month, and it's just based off of looking for the new moon. We don't have to do anything else. We're not adding a number, doing any math. We're just observing and saying, okay, it's still winter. Let's look at it's the new moon and it's still winter. Let's wait until the shifting of the stars, lining it up with the sun, the heat of the sun, the light of the sun, giving us an indicator that spring is here. And then we can continue at that point, and it will line up every time. I'm telling you. Okay. I wanted to point this out, and then I wanted to close. Shabbat. Right? Shabbat. I want to go historically. So Shabbat. Why is Shabbat on supposedly Saturday? I want to show you the empires of this world. The empires of this world adopt the things that they see as beneficial for them from other nations, such as Greece, Persia, even Babylon. When Nebuchadnezzar took Jerusalem captive, what did they do? First thing they did was take all the strong men, for the armies, take all the wise men for the counsel of the king, and that's from every nation. They didn't just do it. What they did was they wanted to acquire wisdom. So they took all the wise men, to acquire their wisdom. Next empire that came in, they did the same thing. Greece, same thing. When the Romans came, they basically looked like Greece. Matter of fact, there was an era in which they referred to it as the Greco-Roman era. Why? Because everything that Rome was doing was adopted by the Greeks, such as their art, their architecture, including their worship. They adopted all of these things and they just renamed it. So I want to point this out. Look at these things now. Look at these things. Now, this is historical reference of the first century, not written by a biased believer. Even though those are very, credible sources, there still could be bias. So what I like to do is I like to get non-biased references. So what I did was I found this statement here. I hope that you guys could see it. I found this statement here from the book Cassius Dio. It's Roman history. So this is not based off of Jewish people, or this is not based off of anything like that. This is straight Roman history, written down historian. Nobody is knowledgeable of nothing, right? This is in the 1st century BC. This is Roman history, page 37, 16, 1-4a. So you could check this out yourself. Cassio Dio, Roman history. The book is called Roman History, 37, 16, 1-4a. This is a quote, a direct quote. It says, "As it was, they made an exception of what they called the days of Saturn, and by doing no work at all on those days, afforded the Romans an opportunity in this interval to batter down the wall. The latter, on leaning for this superstitious awe of theirs, made no serious attempts the rest of the time, but on those days, when they came round in succession, assaulted most vigorously," meaning that they came to attack the Jews in Jerusalem during the Shabbat. It says the defenders were captured on the day of Saturn without making any defense, and all the wealth was plundered. Cassius wrote that the Romans, who learned that the Jews rested on the days of Saturn, Saturday, which was known as Saturn's Day in Rome, attacked Jerusalem's stronghold on those days. These words also tally with the writings of Josephus, showing us that Saturn's Day in Rome coincided with the day kept as the Shabbat by the Jews, even in the 1st century BC. So the Romans waited until Shabbat to attack them because they did not defend themselves on those days. The Romans referred to them that day as the days of Saturn, but that's not how the Israelites viewed them, of course. I mean, I think we could clearly see this. Now, this is referring to 70 AD. Look at the next comment I have. It says, a Roman soldier named Frontius, in his book named Stratagems, writes the account of the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD, saying, the divine Vespasian attacked the Jews on the days of Saturn, on which it is forbidden for them to do anything serious, and they prevailed. Similar to the words of the historian Cassius Dio, the Roman soldier equated the day of rest, Shabbat, of the Jews, the day of Saturn, Saturday, which was known as Saturn's Day in Rome. The account of Vespasian, also known as Titus, attacking Jerusalem on the Shabbat days, tallies with the account seen in the historical works of Josephus, meaning that the historical records of this Roman observing soldier, right, writing down a historical reference of what he's observing, the tactics of the army of Rome during the time of 70 AD, is very important because in 70 AD, we see them keeping the Shabbat, and then the Romans, which adopted different timings, adopted this seventh-day timing. Romulus did not have a seventh-day work week. They adopted the seventh-day work week from Jerusalem. When they saw that the seventh-day work week was more beneficial for their timing, that's what they did, just like they adopted everything else. Just because they adopted it and then named it according to their gods, that doesn't mean that the Israelites was not doing it. They took what the Israelites were doing, and then they took advantage of that, because even though they had Saturn's day, they still attacked the Jews or the Israelites on the Shabbat, which landed on the same day as the Romans' Saturn's day. So I hope that this was clear as far as the reference of us keeping a Gregorian calendar just because we use the Shabbat on the seventh day of the week that we currently have. I hope that we understand that the week was not the same as the calendar, because when the calendar was affected, the days of the week was not. The only thing that was changed was the terminologies, the names of the days. That is the only things that changed. They adopted the seventh-day work week, not in Babylon. Babylon was doing a lunar work week, a lunar worship month. It was the people of Yah that continued to use this work week. And not only the people of Yah, there was many nations that still kept true to what was created originally in ancient times. I want to make one more reference, and then I'm going to make a part 2 to this Q&A and answer some other tough questions. Exodus chapter 12. Have we ever asked the question, like, why would in Exodus chapter 12, yahuah comes to him and says to Moshe and Aaron in the land of Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt, right? Saying, this month shall be to you the beginning of months. It shall be the first of the month of the year to you. Speak ye unto the assembly of yasharal, saying, in the 10th day of this month. So he's giving him a restoration of the month. There's no reference of a week. There's no reference of how many days of the week it is. It's almost as if it's already there. There's no need to mention something that's already there. Why did they mention the Shabbat? Well, the only reason why they mentioned the Shabbat was because the actual Shabbat was forgotten, not the seventh-day week. The Shabbat was forgotten, so he wanted to express to them in Exodus 16 when the Shabbat was going to be. You see? So in Exodus 16, it tells us that he then gives them twice as much manna on the 6th day of the week. Now, even in Exodus 16, there's no indicator that he's telling them when these days land. He's telling them to count the weekly cycle, and then he's telling them that the 7th day is the Shabbat. He doesn't even tell them how to count it, where to put those dates, where to put the date of the Shabbat on it. He doesn't tell them any of that stuff. But when it comes to the appointed times of the month, he starts in Exodus 12. He gives them the beginning of the month. He gives them the new moon. Then he tells them the 10th of the month, 14th of the month, 15th of the month to the 21st. He gives them the dates of the month. But he starts out by saying this is the beginning of the month. He gives them the new moon. There's no indicator of a need for him to tell them a weekly cycle. There's no need to tell him a weekly cycle because he already knows the days of the week. So all he has to do is instruct them what day of the week to do something on, like 6 days. 6 days do this. On the 6th day, pick up 2 times manna. He doesn't have to tell them, oh, the 6th day is right here, lands right here on the 7th of the month. He doesn't have to tell them any of that stuff. He just had to say on the 6th day, take twice as much because the 7th day is Yah's day. This clearly shows that Moses was already aware of a weekly cycle. What he wasn't aware of was a monthly cycle, which is why in Exodus 12, Yah restores the monthly cycle. And then when we get to Exodus 16, he doesn't restore the weekly cycle. He restores the seventh day Shabbat in their understanding, in their remembrance. So I hope that this was clear. If there's any questions that I may have missed or any point that I may have missed, please feel free to contact me and let me know so that way I can make a response video and kind of make some clarifications if I need to. But I hope that this is clear. There will be a part 2 to this Q&A in referencing to the difficult questions about the calendar. I will be discussing the days and the beginning of the days in the following video. So don't make sure that you check that out. All right. I hope this video was a blessing to you in any way. Shalom. Look forward to seeing you guys in the next study. Shalom, shalom. Thank you guys for joining our study today. I hope that it was edifying. And if you want to support this ministry, you can support us on 4alc.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube page. Click the like button and the notification bell. I hope to see you guys on the next study. Shalom, guys.